and welcome to 9 to 42, the podcast from the team at the Guitar Show UK. Join us for interviews, updates and chat with artists, influencers and those that manufacture the gear that we love. Hello and welcome to 9 to 42, which is the podcast from the guys at the Guitar Show UK. And my very good friend Jace Hunt is on screen as normal. Jace, how the devil are you?
I'm okay, Anne. I'm a little bit depressed because of Charlie Watts dying yesterday, which is was the end of rock and roll, really, isn't it? End of days.
Did you see that Keith had put something out? I don't know if it was on Instagram or it was just the drum kit with a closed sign hanging on it. And it feels a bit like that, doesn't it? I mean, he's the heart of that band.
And I just finished reading. The weird thing is, the night before, I just finished reading Sympathy for the Drummer, which is a great book about Charlie. I mean, it's written from a drummer's perspective about Charlie's drumming, really, and a lot of the technical aspects I didn't quite understand. But I got nothing but respect for him, and he is the kind of the swing and the roll of the Rolling Stones, or was the swing and the roll of the Rolling Stones, and. You know, I mean, we talked about it yesterday. I really hope they just knock it on the head now. Just, you know, it was Charlie's band all along. Well, that's what Keith kept saying. So, you know, without Charlie, there is no band.
Yeah, I have to say I agree. And I was just about to rip the piss out of you for wearing the same T-shirt 3 podcasts on, and I don't feel I can now. With that slightly melancholic start. Anyway, we'll raise it a gear. We've got JasonHow from Rotosound with us, which is a treat. How are you, Jace?
I'm really good, thanks, guys, and very good to be here. Nice to be asked. Thank you very much. All good, really.
Well, I mean, I wanted you on this podcast for quite a while because, your company, Rotosound, I think started in the late 50s, 58, something like that.
I've got paperwork, to 55, when my dad's written this letter, and I've got it here in the cupboard. It says, I'm looking for wire to make strings. So I can date the very start to 1955, October, I think.
Which kind of puts you, I think, certainly from our world, the rock and roll world. I mean, you're right there at the birth of rock and roll from the mid-50s, obviously. But are you the oldest British MI rock and roll industry kind of company?
I guess Marshall has got to be...
Marshall is celebrating their 60th anniversary next year. And if you go 55, I think you're, 68? 65 years old, something like that?
Well, it would have to be said that it would look that way. 1955, the world out there was very different from 10 years on to 1965. Yeah. I think my dad went through quite a big transition, being a violinist and zither player, to having John Entwistle turn up in his Batmobile at the factory. In 1965, yeah.
So how did let's start at the beginning, really. How did your dad start? Why did your dad start Rotosound?
It all started with a film called The Third Man, starring Anton Karas and Orson Welles. Actually, so starring Anton Karas. Anton Karas was the guy that played the zither, which is that famous bit of music you'll know called the Harry Lime theme, which is da 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 da, you know. And they're walking through the streets in Vienna, I think. It's a spy movie. But he heard that piece of music and he was like, well, I like that. What instrument's that played on? And found out that it was played on a zither, which, is no more popular today than it was back in 1955. So, it's like the size of a large breadboard with about 50 strings on it. And it's a very complex instrument to play because you've got to hold the chords down with your left hand. You've got like 5 strings. You play the chords with your left hand. You have a finger pick on your thumb, your right thumb, and you're picking the melody like you would on a guitar. But then your 4 fingers on your right hand are picking out the bass notes on on another bunch of strings that they're not fretted. They're basically just open strings. But it's a complicated instrument to play. But anyway, the story of why he started Rotosound was that he bought these instruments, broke strings, couldn't find strings. So initially he bought more zithers. Oh yeah, I need a set of strings, so I'll just buy. It's like I've broken a guitar string, so I'll go and buy another guitar.
I think we can all relate to that.
Yeah, but so he ended up, so he told me, with like hundreds of these zithers with various different strings missing. But one zither, which I have here, I've got about 20, but I've got one that's his favourite, which he kept with complete string sets on. And I think he thought, why don't I make strings for all the other zithers and then sell the zithers with complete string sets? And there was born a string company.
Wow.
And because he was an engineer working at Vickers Armstrongs in Woolwich, southeast London, what I heard, what he told me, is that he would go to work every day with a big case, like a big satchel thing, and in his lunch breaks and after work, he'd be making bits for the string machine that he was building in his shed. So every night he would walk home with another bit that he'd made, and after about 3 years, had his first machine.
Basically, he stole enough material.
Probably, yeah.
It's about 3 years.
It was probably subsidised, yeah. But and that would have been the late 1950s. And the first company was called Orchestral and Jazz Strings because it was the late 50s, and it was zither strings, violin strings, because he played the violin. I've got all his notes. And then in the early 60s, it became Rotop, which was Roto. But it was originally, before that, he wanted to call it the brand Top Strings, but couldn't register the word top.
Right.
So it was Roto, it was Roto from round, Latin round, Top Strings. And then in 1963, it became Rotosound.
Ah.
And that you could register, because it's a unique... name. That's it, really.
So then I suppose you transition. You come out of that sort of, I suppose, at the time, the popular music. Whilst you still would have had Cliff Richard in the late 50s and the Shadows and so on. It's a very early sort of like birth of British rock and roll. But by the time you've moved into the mid 60s, of course you've got the Beatles and the Stones and probably the Who and Kinks and so on. So how did your dad kind of break into that world?
Well, I think from what I gather, John Entwistle, I think the initial thing was he was looking for strings for his Dan Electro bass, and he couldn't get the sound he wanted, so I think my dad made him some of these round wound strings up, and which were the first kind for bass guitar because they were all flat wound before that. And John went to the factory and tried the strings and said, yeah, these sound great, but I think we can make this string a bit thicker, and that one a bit thinner, and that one we need a bit less tension on the core. And the stories I heard were my dad was there like half the night with John. My dad was on the machine making strings and John was there with his bass trying them, and they were just chucking all these strings around until they got the set that John was really happy with.
And that's what became Swing 66, is it?
Swing Bass 66, yeah.
So are they the first manufactured round wound bass strings sort of like in the world?
Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah, that's how it I know it. Yeah. So before that, it was all flat wounds and thumpy bass lines,
So was your dad making flat wound strings then anyway? He was already making bass strings, which obviously what brought John round to knock on the door.
Yeah, he was making flat wounds, and actually I think just before the round wounds he was making the black nylon bass strings, which were made for the Burns Bison bass. But the other thing with the black nylon strings, which is quite important in our history, is that he also had a lot of people coming to him saying, I've got this new Fender bass like it's electric bass, and I've got my double bass, and I'm going to gigs, and I'm having to take my double bass for these songs and my electric bass for these songs because the music was transitioning. And my dad said, well, why don't I make you a set of electric bass strings that sound like your double bass strings? And that was the true bass. The black nylon strings were made from 1962, and of which were made famous by a lot of people. You know, Paul McCartney, the last 2 years of the Beatles, those strings are on Abbey Road, and they're on Let It Be, that album. In fact, if you look at the sessions on the top of the Apple building, you can see the black nylon strings have a very... the silk at the end is yellow, and you can see those strings on Paul's bass. So they were quite an important product, but they were out before the round ones in 1962.
What was your childhood like? If people like John Entwistle are rocking up to the factory, and I'm assuming as a small child, you were going to the factory as well.
Well, he would have been there when I was born, so I don't remember. But I do remember. If you're asking me about my childhood memories, I think the first band I went to see would have been in the early 70s, and it would have been Yes.
Right.
And it would have been, Chris Squire, because obviously he was using our strings. So I remember that, and I think I remember crying because it was probably really loud. Probably the start of the tinnitus, But yeah, I remember. That I don't remember the rock star thing. It's a handful I remember. I don't ever remember meeting John Entwistle as a kid, but I probably did, and loads in between. So yeah.
When would you have started remembering who you met? What, from the mid-70s onwards?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't get involved, in the business. I mean, I remember my dad building the new factory in Bexley Heath in 1971. I remember playing with the bricks with my cousin outside the factory. But, he kept the business pretty separate to my home life, I think, And I don't think at the time, till I started getting into music, till I was like 12 or 13, he was bringing albums home. He brought home vinyl, which I've still got today, like Reckless Eric on brown vinyl, stiffs with, Elvis Costello, Nick Lowe, Ian Dury, Reckless Eric, Larry Wallace. He brought the first two Jam albums home. I remember him bringing a bunch of ELO albums home in the mid-70s. But he wasn't into that music, so he probably just thought, I'll be into it. Yeah. So I let him have the vinyl, and that was really, that was my first introduction, I guess, when I was 10 or 12.
So I'm assuming, because I've seen photographs, I think on social media, of like your dad at sort of like NAMM shows in Chicago and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that would have been the sort of like 60s and 70s.
Late 60s. Yeah.
I mean, I just can't imagine what, you go from working from Vickers to running your own company, and all of a sudden you're in Chicago and stuff like that. It must have been like a really weird transition, and I can't imagine many people of our age had dads that were, flying off to the States for work and stuff. Yeah,
it was always like, my dad's pretty cool, But it was funny because it was my childhood. It was just normal. It was just like, well, that's what he does. I mean, I spent more time as a kid in the garage helping him take Bugatti engines out of his cars, and doing motocross with him because he liked motorbikes. And so I think I probably got more out of my engineering. I got more from engineering out of my dad, than the business. But, that's what I remember from my childhood. And that was it.
Was it the technical side of it that drove your dad then? Because by the sounds of things, it wasn't the music. The people that started coming along through the 60s. The musical side of it didn't really talk to him from what you've said. So was it just the technical aspect of being able to produce something that did a job for somebody?
It was all about making a product that the players, the artists, were happy with. You know, Jimi Hendrix wanted these gauge strings, so my dad said, well, I'll make you those. And I guess at the time, you know, what did we have in the UK as far as string companies go? There was probably British Music Strings that were down in Wales, Picato, I think, wherever they were, and Rotosound in South East London, with a whole shed load of bands like Pink Floyd, The Who, Jimi Hendrix, all in London.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, well, where do we go to get our strings? Well, there's this company down in Kent, that just up the road from Vox. They can make you the strings you want. And, you know, now everything's been developed, designed or stolen from other companies. But back then, it was a pioneering time. And it was like, you know, as I think the Ernie Ball story goes, you know, people were taking banjo strings and putting them on their guitars. And then... So, you know, it was an interesting time. And the company owners and what have you were in the string business. A lot of them were engineers, so a lot of them could solve those problems because they had the knowledge to build the machinery or buy the materials that the artist wanted. So I think my dad's biggest passion was, you know, he was proud of the fact that John Entwistle was going off to America with 50 sets of swing bass, or that Roger Waters was recording Dark Side of the Moon and using our flatwounds and still uses our flatwounds, you know. So yeah, I mean, it was a lucky time, but it's also the fact that the really most important thing here is our bass strings are made a certain way and they sound a certain way. And no other company, I know quite a bit about how other string companies make strings, and they don't do things the same way as we do. And there's certain elements of making them, especially with the bass strings, that give the strings a certain sound and tone. And I've built enough machines now to know how to keep all those old elements from the old machines and incorporate them into the new machinery.
Yeah, we were talking before you came on, me and Ant, and you know, it felt like for quite a while, every time I phoned you, someone would answer the phone and go, he's on the shop floor underneath the machine. Which is like not what I expect from...
It's the last 20 years.
You know, someone who runs a company. So when did you join Rotosound?
Well, I'll just put it right here, because my wife runs the company, really. I'm just the oily rag. No, my wife runs all the production. She's, you know, much more organised than I am. This is true. You know what they say behind every successful... What do they say? But no, Kathy really, I mean, she's... I'm pretty good at doing that mechanical stuff, but she's the person that organises everything, you know. Which has allowed me to get on and build the machines, yeah.
Did you leave school and go straight into the family business, or, you know, did you go off and do something else?
No, I went to work for an engineering company. I went to college in the late 80s, did my BTEC, whatever it is, in mechanical and production engineering, because my dad said to me, go and learn how to make stuff, you know. And for a company like ours, that was probably the best thing I could have done, really, because it's a skill, and obviously now it's a skill that's becoming even less prevalent. Although I think with things as they are, maybe a lot of the UK will start to realise that some of the manufacturing needs to come back home. But it never left for us, so you know.
Yeah. So how old were you when you jumped back into Rotosound?
I come back in really in about 1992. My dad died in 94, and I had my brother. You know, I think you met my brother, didn't you?
I did,
sure
years ago.
Years ago. I mean, he's not here now. He's still a shareholder in the business, but he's not actually here. But you know, my brother would be even more interesting to talk to, because he goes back even further with the company, and he would remember John Entwistle being at the factory, because he's 15 years older than me. But So yeah, it was the mid-90s that I got involved, and I just had my vision of what I thought the company needed, you know, rightly or wrongly. I don't think it served us too badly, you know. But like anything, you're never satisfied, are you? It's like, well, we've done this, but we should have done that, or...
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, anybody that runs their own business, I mean, mine is considerably smaller than yours, but at the same time, every time I finished a guitar show, I'm like, yeah, that was all great, but I only ever see the bits that I could have improved upon. And you go, well, next year I'm going to put them right, and then you do the next show, and then you go, but that bit was wrong, and it's just like this constant desire to actually try and get the perfect show, you know, which will never happen.
I call it nailing a blancmange to the ceiling.
Yeah.
Somebody says, what do you do? And I was like, yeah, that sums it up.
From what you've just been saying then, is it the same thing, is it a similar thing that drove your dad that drives you? Is Rotosound for you, or in its purest form, is it you solving problems, you know, through engineering? So I can find a solution to this, I can help that person overcome or get the sound they're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, with the strings, I try not to change too much, because I think the track record of certain string sets is so ingrained in the music business and on albums, you know. I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do to improve that? I just need to make it more efficiently and more consistently and promote it better. I don't need to come up with a new product, although we try, you know, we come out with new materials and stuff. The core product is always the most important thing. So we just try and improve that, really. But yeah, I mean, we're all trying to, you know, make people happy with what, if they want this or they want that. We obviously try and help out, you know.
Bringing it forward a little bit then, and I suppose there's two things, because one you've kind of alluded to, and obviously the other one is kind of the elephant in the room anyway. Firstly, how's the pandemic been? Did you see a huge upturn in demand through the pandemic?
We actually, it's... When I look at our figures, we're up this year. We're up. It's the end of our financial year this month. We're up a good percentage, double figures. It's been surprisingly good, I have to say. I mean, when like all of us, we heard that live music was being knocked on the head, I think everybody panicked. And but I think that equally, the number of people that were playing live music have probably just gone home and played music, or gone online, done video, Zoom calls, been writing at home, recording at home. And I don't think it's really, you know, it's like I think with our industry, with the music industry, everybody's so passionate, you know, you'd really have to do... people are still going to play music. Whatever happens, they're still going to pick the guitar up. So I think we've been quite fortunate. We've pretty much worked all the way through. Manufacturing has been allowed to stay open, so it's been pretty much business as usual for us.
And obviously there's been a lot of new people pick up instruments as well. Either a lot of lapsed musicians or a lot of people it's been something they've wanted to do and they've needed a space in time to do it. And obviously being locked away at home's allowed people to do that. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, I was at the dentist the other week, and Rob, my dentist, said to me, I've just got the guitar out of the loft, you know. So I think there's been a lot of that going on. So yeah, I think the number of string sets consumed, I think has probably not really changed a lot. We've had some very good business from other countries. Japan's been very good. South America's been very good. So yeah, I think everybody's managed to stick with that or improve it, you know.
Brexit is obviously the other. Now you like you say, your manufacturing's in the UK, so a lot of companies have been hit by trying to get product in from overseas, which obviously isn't an issue for you. But I don't know where you are in terms of what raw materials or anything that you rely on. Has Brexit affected? Has that
Well, I actually one of our directors, John, he retired last October, and I took over a whole bunch of his work. And one of the jobs that he did was buying all the raw materials. So I kind of made it my plan from last year, because of all the ups and downs, upheavals with shipping. I made it my sort of goal to stock up big time on raw materials. You know, we buy our raw materials from about 10 or 20 countries, 10 or 15 countries. A small amount from Europe, some in the UK, some from the States, and some from other places. Oddly enough, you know, silk that goes on the strings comes from Bulgaria. But there's not been there's been an increase in shipping costs, because I've gone from some stuff that I would bring in by sea freight. I've opted to bring it in by air freight, just to be doubly sure. Brexit hasn't really been an issue, but I don't think B2B has been affected. I think B2C businesses have been affected. If you're retailing into Europe, I think that's been a different story. But B2B, I've not had any. You know, we've had hold ups. We've had some delays in bringing in the distribution products we bring in from Holland, but that's pretty much settled down now. So yeah, we've been dodging the bullets, and it's been it's been okay. It's not been too much of an issue. As I say, I think supply chain. This has shown up weaknesses in supply chains, and which has always been something with the manufacturing. I thought we must never let go of the manufacturing, because it's absolutely so key. And I think it's shown itself to be right through the last 15 or 16 months, you know. Because
you managed to keep good stocks of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've got, you know, over 6 months of raw material stocks here. So I'm just trying to keep everything. Keep it as we haven't run out of stock of anything string wise throughout the last 15 months. So.
And what about, because the other hot topic is sustainability? You know, I mean, I wouldn't know whether string production was good or bad for the planet in that respect. I mean, is it an area where, is that something Rotosound are thinking about?
We jumped onto that in 2014. We started producing guitar strings and bass strings with the most minimal packaging across the whole of the string business. Since 2014, our guitar strings and bass strings are packaged. Our packaging weight is 3 grams. All our competitors are 25, 30 grams. We have a foil pack, and inside that foil pack is 6 strings with a desiccant. And I think we are the only string company that does that. We don't use paper, we don't use cardboard. So our packaging has been, since 2014, the most minimal across the whole of the string business.
You say 6 strings. Have you ditched the additional E string now then?
7, sorry. And only 4 with bass, Jason. So we're quite proud of our, you know, and this is one way of looking at this, is when we export, for example, to whatever country. We used to be able to get 300 sets of guitar strings in our export carton. We now get over 600 in the same space. So I think, as far as sustainability, we've tried to take it as far as we can. You know, we can't go to any less packaging than we're at.
No.
And I can't believe that some of these other companies are still, you know, using multiple options to package something that... What do you do the minute you take all your strings out of the packs?
You just throw the packaging away.
I think, you know, when I was a kid, it was really handy having them in their individual envelopes. You know, this is a 10, this is a 12, whatever. Because I used to, A, not be able to afford to buy a new set of strings very often. And B, you know, I was probably playing cheap guitars with cheap bridges, which were snapping the odd strings or something, and I'm playing like an elephant because I'm 12 or 13. So that was really useful. But now, as an adult, I haven't broken a string for years. And I, you know, when I change my strings, I just change all of them.
Yeah.
You know, so like, yeah.
There is that argument, I think some of the other companies, I think some of the other companies still want to keep the individual string packs, but individual envelopes. But I think it was quite a bold step to take. But I think eventually it's going to get to that. I think eventually it will. I think people will start thinking, why am I buying these strings with, But not all the string companies use envelopes, as you know. But some of them do. And it's whatever works for those companies, I don't think if we use envelopes, it's going to help our sales. I think, and we might have lost a few people that like having strings in envelopes to throw away. But
I can remember the very last time I broke a string, and I was on stage, and it was a working men's club somewhere in South Yorkshire. And I snapped a string, and it was at that point in time there was two of us in this duo, and as it happened, the next song was one that Paul did on his own. So I was going off stage anyway, so I went off stage with my guitar, and I'd got a spare set of strings, and I changed this string, and I'm there messing about and doing what I'm doing, and I'd forgotten to switch my wireless pack off. Because I got in my head, I was too wound up with the idea of broken a string. So the normal things I would do when I went off stage, I'd forgotten to do. So I'm there backstage doing my thing and what have you, and come back on stage, and I walk back on, and the entire audience is looking at me, and Paul just looked at me and just went, "Thanks, mate," because he'd been doing whatever ballad he'd been doing.
With you in the background.
And there's me in the background going, wee, 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 wee. And he's just, you walk back on to, normally I used to walk back on, and they'd be applauding him because he'd just finished whatever he was doing. He used to do some heartfelt ballad or what have you. And it was just, you could have heard a pin drop, and he was just looking thunder at me. And that was the last time I broke a guitar string. I've got that memory imprinted.
It is a difficult thing, isn't it? I mean, I've been out a bit lately, and I'll always take a spare acoustic now, kind of.
Well, I used to have two guitars, and then I got to the point where it's like, it's just not worth it. I don't need it for sounds or anything. And I used to do it because I used to have my second guitar was an open tuning. And actually, as it worked out, which was for we finished off a set with Brown Sugar, and I used to pop it into open tuning and I got to the stage where I could do it while he was chatting, and then we were at the end of a set, so I just changed it back through the thing. So I stopped taking an extra guitar. As you know, when you gig and you've only got an amount of space, and it was like, I'm taking an extra guitar for one song. I don't need to. Yeah. So at that point, I'd gotten, because I would have just picked up the other one, but I'd forgotten to switch it off, and it's just howling through the PA.
Yeah. I mean, I think getting back to the packaging, I think when we changed over, we had a few people complain, but generally, I think they all went with it, and I think now it's like are our customers, maybe the younger customers, going to be more critical of maybe companies that aren't using the least amount of packaging than they were 10 years ago?
Absolutely.
I think that may be the case, but it works for us, and also it. The other problem is if you use any kind of paper up against wire, you're going to end up with corrosion at some point. So we didn't want to put paper in with wire. We just wanted to get rid of that whole issue. So, but whatever works for each company, really.
Well, where you are right is that consumers are going to, they will change the attitudes of companies anyway, because they will start demanding sustainable options and product that's as sustainably sourced and manufactured as possible. So I think to be ahead of that curve is great, because nobody's going to get left behind on this long term.
I mean, maybe the box packaging might look a bit prettier. I don't know. I mean,
does anyone really care? I mean, it is literally something you just rip open.
Well, exactly. You're going to throw away 3 grams as opposed to 25 grams. I mean, that all adds up when you're selling tens of thousands of sets of strings. We were buying these paper envelopes, and I mean, shipping tons of paper envelopes, put strings in them, send them to a customer, throw away the paper envelope. I mean, it's like...
Well, and I think the point of my little story was it's that long since I changed an individual string. To Jason's point, you know, the audience who changes sets of string not out of necessity in terms of because they're broken a string, but because actually you want to, you know, it's maintenance for your guitar and your sound and your tone is far higher. You know, I in my own head I can't think that it's any more than maybe 10% who change because they break and 90% who change because they need a new set of strings. You know, I don't break strings. You know, and I've never really come across anybody who said to me, "Oh yeah, I break strings all the time." You know,
no, it's going to happen. It is going to happen occasionally, but you know, hopefully not that often, and not when you're in the middle of a gig anyway.
No, I went to see my mate. He was playing a gig local, and I got there, and they were just starting. So I was stood leaning at the bar, and I'd had like a sip of my Guinness. And he broke a string, and he's staring at me with all these people watching him, and he's going, mate, like miming, mate. So gets to the end of the song, and he just hands me his guitar, goes and gets his spare. So I end up being his bloody roadie, and I'm in the gents of this pub trying to put in it, but I haven't got a tuner, got a band at full tilt, and I'm like, tension feels about right, that'll have to do. He can tune it up with his tuner when I get there, but
that's all rock and roll.
So is there anything new on the horizon? I mean, you said that a lot of your time is spent just looking for ways to ensure consistency and be as efficient as possible, and you know, produce the product as efficiently and to the sort of standard as possible. Is there anything new sort of floating around in the world of strings?
There's a few ideas that we're working on at the moment, which are top secret. And
all right.
If I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Right. Okay.
It's a good job we're on Zoom then.
Yeah. You sure you don't want to risk it and give us some form of 942 scoop here?
No. We're right at the infancy of this, breakthrough development in string manufacturing.
Right. You'll have to come back and tell us when you.
Whatever happened to? We're at NAMM. I don't know. It must have been about 5 years ago, something like that. And you gave me a set of guitar strings and went, "Here, try these." Which were brilliant because I've got a Les Paul Custom, a black Les Paul Custom, so it's black and gold. And you gave me a set of strings that were black and gold strings.
Oh yeah.
That I put them on, and it was like, this is the coolest looking thing.
They never sold. Oh
really?
Yeah, Nexus. Yeah.
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah. They were the black anodized wound strings.
Yeah.
The 24, 32, 42, and they were the platinum plated top three strings. Yeah.
You haven't got any left.
I was going to say, it seems like your audience was somebody sort of with a bit of spare cash who was slightly shallow. So Jace is absolutely your man, isn't he? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was completely gobsmacked because I thought, like you did, you put those on the guitar and it looks stunning. But yeah, it just shows that guitarists are a conservative bunch.
Yeah, I think
so.
That know that.
Yeah, that's actually that, and that. You know what? That is a long time ago. That is longer than 5 years ago.
Is it?
Yeah, they come out in 2009.
Okay.
There you go.
Honestly, every NAMM just merges into, it's just one big NAMM show as far as my memory's concerned.
Maybe it's because you were wearing the same T-shirt, Jace, in 2009.
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is, it was probably because I spent the first 10 years of NAMM drinking Long Island iced teas.
Yeah.
Almost
that'd do
singularly.
It. Oh dear.
Yeah, that'd do it.
So, I mean, there's other stuff other than Rotosound that we should touch on because you're quite an interesting chap. I mean, I've got written down Saab.
Yeah.
And I think this ties in quite nicely with your reducing your packaging. You're recycling really old cars, aren't you?
Yeah, when I get time. Yeah, no, well, I bought my first Saab for 60 quid. From a breaker's yard in 1985, and it had 3 wheels on it, by the time I drove it home, it had 4, but and the clutch was stuck to the flywheel. But I went to this breakers yard with a mate of mine, and he was looking for some spare parts for his Triumph Herald, and I'm like, yeah, I'll come down there with you. It's a place called Paddock Wood near here, and in the corner of this breakers yard was this dark green like bubble, like this round shape. And I'm like, wow, what a cool looking car that is. I didn't know anything about them, but I asked the guy in the breakers yard, I said, are you selling it? And he said, well, not really, he said, because I've got a guy coming next week that wants the back axle. And I've sold him the back axle, and then I'm going to break the car up. And I said, well, if I buy the car, I want to restore it. I said, and he said, if you want to restore it, he said, I'd rather sell it to you than break it. I'd rather sell it to you as a going, almost going concern. So I bought it and I loved it, and it was just all my mates had Mark 1 Escorts. We all had mates that had Mark 1 Escorts back then. So it was like, do you know what? Being like I am, I guess it was just I want something no one else has got, and that's how I ended up with the Saab. But and then I drove it for a few months until various bits fell off it, and I then decided, right, I'm going to restore it. So I had a go at rebuilding it. By that time, I bought a couple more just so I could have one to drive. And then I started getting into the older ones, because this one I bought, the first car was 1972. And then I realised the older ones were like 2-strokes and interesting, really interesting. And so that was how I got into Saabs, and I've still got 3. I've still got that car, and I've still got 2 others, which I love to bits. They're not huge. They're not worth massive amounts of money, but they are, from an engineering point of view, they're beautifully engineered and unique, and they pioneered a lot of stuff. Which ended up on other cars.
Is that the bit that speaks to you, the engineering side of it?
It's just the shape of the car is just like, until they were way ahead of the curve. In 1950, they had a car with a 0.30 drag coefficient, which is like, nowadays that's considered good. They had it in 1950, Dual circuit braking, which every car now has dual circuit braking. It was stuff like that. Heated seats. They come out with all this stuff that is now standard on every car. But they pioneered it, So, interesting company. And it was a shame, obviously, when they went out of business. In a strange way, they were a bit like us, in a way, Rotosound. They pioneered a lot of stuff. They weren't the biggest car company, but they were unique in that way, when General Motors bought them, kind of their appeal to me kind of went down a little bit,
Yeah.
So that's Saabs, yeah.
And you've released 6 solo albums in the last 10, 15 years?
2013. So there's 6 albums on iTunes. And yeah, I'm basically just like you said in that email, sort of playing catch up on having a big long break from doing my music from the late 90s to 2009, when all I thought about every day was building string machines. And by the time I'd had 10 years of that, in fact, Kathy said to me, she said, why don't you get back into your music? And I'm like, yeah, maybe. And I tried to cobble all my old analog stuff back together. Fostex 8-track and my Mackie desk and my what's the computer? Amstrad?
Atari.
Atari, yeah. And all the discs, the floppy discs, and then it was like, well, you can do it all now on a Mac, with interfaces and what have you. So I got that in 2009 and started getting back into my music, so, which I've always really liked anyway. I've always enjoyed the songwriting. I'm a crap guitar player, but I think my strength is the songwriting, so.
Yeah, and they seem to there's a there's kind of like two strands that I think that runs through it. That you've got like a bit of psychedelia that goes on, which you mentioned Syd Barrett earlier, which must come from that sort of side.
Yeah.
But you've also got like punk, but then you mentioned like Stiff Records and stuff like that earlier as well, and you seem to kind of like straddle both of those. And you've got a band as well now, is it Soda Prism?
Soda Prism has been around a couple of years, yeah, and it's more acoustic. That's that band. I play acoustic guitar in that.
And then is there another new band as well that I've seen you've been rehearsing?
Yeah, there's another kind of garage rock kind of punk band called The Next Agenda, which is we actually got our first gig tonight.
Oh wow!
Well, it's more like a jam night, but we've got a solo slot for half an hour.
Yeah,
and I've actually got together with a friend of mine who I've known for 25 years. He's a brilliant bass player, and a friend of a friend introduced me to this drummer who's a brilliant drummer. We've had 6 rehearsals and we're like ready to go. So I say all original stuff, but more the punk garage rock kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So just having a bit of fun with that, really, just getting out there and playing. And
is it just nice to kind of obviously still music, because that's that's the job, but that's the life. But actually, you just step away and you're not thinking about winding strings and building machines and stuff like that. So it's the fun element of the job rather than the day-to-day sort of side of the job.
Yeah, because whatever type of music we like, or whatever type of music we like playing or listening to, that's always going to be enjoyable, and it's always going to be work. Is always going to be work. I've written hundreds of songs, probably like yourself, and I just want to get out and play them. And a lot of acoustic stuff, which is quieter, is with Soda Prism, and the more angsty stuff that I want to play, the shouty stuff, is with the new band. So
excellent. So when are we getting the new records out?
Well, we're trying to put together. We were in a studio last week rehearsing, and I'm trying to put together like a mini live EP, which will be probably 6 or 8 tracks, depending on how many we feel have come out well enough. So yeah, we're working on that. I'm trying to, next couple of months, or a month maybe, as fitting all this stuff in, But you know what it's like. It's I'm lucky that I'm in an industry where we're into music, and I can also do my hobby. The two kind of mesh into one,
Yeah.
It'd be wrong not to do it, wouldn't it? But obviously we deal with loads of fantastic players and guitar players and bass players. So this for me is just a hobby,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Have any of them helped out? Have any of them jumped onto any of the recordings?
James Lomenzo, I guess. I haven't really asked anybody, to be honest. I seem to have some, good fans. Paul Gray and Captain Sensible of the Damned really like what I do. I've got a support slot which I'm shooting for, which I won't tell you which band it's with, but if I get that, I'll be very pleased. This is with the punk band, so I'm just finding my feet with that, really. I was never really confident getting up there and singing, but a mate of mine who I've known for years, he was like, nothing wrong with your voice, get up and do it, songs are good. So it kind of pushed me to do it and just let go of any inhibitions that I had, really. It's that saying, is that book, wasn't it? If not now, when? It's like,
yeah.
Why am I putting off trying to get support with my favourite 70s punk band? Why? They can only say no.
Yeah.
But, they could say yes. It could happen.
I think that gets to a point, certainly in life, age, where actually you don't really care if anybody says no. You just ask anyway, and you're surprised. I mean, when I got Paul Stanley to do this, I didn't actually expect him to say yes. But it didn't really bother me trying to get him to say yes, and and then when
you did that and it was successful, then it opens the doors to saying, well, I'll ask so and so now, and they could say yes.
Well, we weren't going to ask you, Jason, but once Paul Stanley had been on, we thought, right, we'll pitch for Jason at Rotosound now. That's how it works out.
You caught me on a good day.
So, well, look, I think that's a lovely place to finish, isn't it? To bring it all back round to the music, which is what it, where it should all tie up. So, thanks a lot for finding the.
No, thank you for having me.
The time.
It's been a pleasure. I mean, Jason and I go back a long way, anyway. So we're always talking about all this stuff, on air, or off air, or wherever in the bar, somewhere. We all share a lot of similar passions, and we've always enjoyed doing the shows, working with you guys, and hopefully that will come back with a vengeance. Now,
fingers crossed.
Yeah, and I'm having a half day today, so that's why I couldn't do this afternoon. My bass player's coming over to do some backing vocals, so.
Oh well, that's way more important than doing
priorities. String making, backing vocals,
rock and roll. Well, literally, thanks a lot. And obviously, we need to just quickly shout out and say our thanks to Focusrite as well for continuing to support the podcast, which they do. So thanks very much to the Focusrite folks for everything as per normal, and we'll see you again in the coming weeks, I guess, Jace.
Absolutely. I just want to say quickly a big thank you to my wife as well, who's been a rock. So
say hello to Kathy for me.
I will, yeah. And you guys take care.
All right, take care.
Good
Cheers,
to see you.
Bye.
Cheers, bye.
Thanks for listening to 9 to 42, the podcast from the team at the Guitar Show UK. If you've enjoyed the show, then please remember to hit the subscribe button and share with other like-minded souls. For more information about 9 to 42, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram at the Guitar Show UK. This has been an A Short Stories production.